What's up, everybody? Day 80 of 100 Days of Code. And it's your boy, once again, Kendall, here talking about 100 Days of Code, talking about what we got up to at School of Codes, and sharing about thoughts and feelings. So, we know the rules are one, we code 1 hour a day, two, we share publicly with Twitter and LinkedIn and all those sort of things, and three, we share our thoughts and feelings. So, what did we get up to today? Well, today we got up to lots of amazing things. We got up to talking about sort of the weird things that are in JavaScript, which is really interesting, and talking about sort of, just weird things that sometimes JavaScript does. And I'd never really thought about it before because obviously I've always known JavaScript because it's pretty much the first official language I've learned about. So I didn't actually know pretty much any of the things they were talking about. So they were talking about things like operators, which I know what operators are, of course, operator precedence and things like that. So we looked at sort of determining how the operators are parsed in JavaScript concerning each other, and we talked about operators with higher precedence. They become the operands of operators with lower precedence, things like that. Um, we also looked a bit about things that are truthy, so things that are a little bit weird in JavaScript. So, for example, if you did something like, what is it? One is less than two and two is less than three, and you did them in a row, it would come out as true. Where if you came out three is greater than two and two is greater than one, it would come out as false. And so we looked at the difference between sort of static dynamic and versus strong and weak, and different programming languages and how they work. And so in some programming languages, there's sort of, so for instance, JavaScript, there's implicit things that happen in JavaScript that produce a result. Where maybe in a stronger, when I say stronger, I just mean that it's more clearly defined. It's not as loose. JavaScript is a bit more open, a bit more loose, and it can sort of come up with things quite quickly in those sort of things, and sort of can sometimes decide things implicitly. Where something like, for example, perhaps something like Python, for example, wouldn't be, for example. So it will be more clear and it will sort of already have those things declared beforehand. So it's a little bit less open if you're in one of those sort of languages where JavaScript's a bit more open. So if you were to sort of, let a variable be something and it was a string, then you define it as a number later on and you called that variable in JavaScript, that'd be fine. If it was something like Python, it wouldn't be fine because it knows those are two different types. So we talked a bit about those sort of things. What else did we talk about? We looked at then TypeScript. So we began to learn about what TypeScript is. So what is TypeScript? We began to look at what problem does TypeScript solve? What are the pros and cons of TypeScript? And with TypeScript, you can change the file name from .js to .ts, and then that extension allows you to your code to then be sort of tested or to be checked to make sure. So there'll be something like, for example, you might say a variable, and you might say const my number, and then there'd be like a little colon, and then you might say number, and say that it's a number, and then you'd say equals, and then you put two. And then later on, what you couldn't do in TypeScript is it would make it stronger. So then later on, if you wanted to say, well, my number now needs to be a string, you wouldn't be able to do that. And TypeScript would highlight that error. And it does things like that. So TypeScript is really useful in those senses. And we took a little look at like me and my partner, Maya, we sort of took a little look at why that's the case. So we began to look at, I'm just bringing up my little notes here. So we looked at things like, TypeScript. So TypeScript is obviously, it adds additional syntax to JavaScript to support tighter integration with your editor. It's a result you can trust. So TypeScript code converts to JavaScript, which runs anywhere JavaScript runs, in a browser, Node.js or Deno. It's safety at scale, so TypeScript understands JavaScript and uses type inference to give great tooling as well. So there's lots of cool things it can do. Sort of the downside can be things like, obviously it's difficult. It can be difficult to learn. It could take longer to put things together, but in the long term, it can be easier to maintain a code base and to be able to sort of know what's going on and things are clearly defined. So that's a little bit about today. So we did an exercise in the afternoon where we were given sort of a file that had lots of things that were in typical JavaScript. But then we had to then convert that file to TypeScript, and then we had to sort of go through debugging each of the things. And maybe, for example, it was classic rock, paper, scissors, but we had to sort of, for example, make a type and say that the type of the player choices when they choose a whatever it is, then that's defined as a string or a number or whatever it is, and then you can then bring that object into the different areas. So those are a bit of things we did today. My thoughts and my feelings are it's been a challenging day. Learning new things always is. It always feels like a bit of like panic stations, but yeah, learning is fun. I'm sure we'll get the hang of it. I mean, had I thought like 12 weeks ago I'd be able to have the proficiency in any of the languages that I know now? No. But I feel a lot more confident with those, so I'm sure it's just a matter of time before TypeScript becomes one of those things as well. Will I be an expert? No. Will I have an idea? Yes. So yeah, those are my thoughts and feelings. Anyways, guys, hope you've had a wonderful day. Peace out, and we'll see you guys soon.